Our reality that we live in this 3D world is an illusion. It's a mirror. Then you know, well, wait a minute. If I'm a co-creator, I can change. I can manifest. I have a choice.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this world. This is Pesci's Recovery Corner, special edition. We are going to be doing some very special things with this podcast. I've got my friend Jason here today. Jason, welcome to the corner.
Always a pleasure, Pej.
Jason's a solid man, a good man, a good friend. So, today's topic is going to be called the 14th step. We'll get into that in just a little bit because I know it could be confusing, and I'll talk about that a little bit. This is a recovery podcast. We talk about all things recovery from all walks of life. People in, addiction, alcoholism, or mental health that have been suffering and how they get out of that and end up getting recovered. So I think earlier we talked about calling this the 13th step, and I know that probably would have drawn people in, but
yeah, you enlightened me. I didn't know what the 13th step was.
So they may have been misled. So usually, in a recovery world, in the 12-step world, a lot of people work the 12 steps of whatever 12-step organization that they're part of, and then there's this funny, cute saying that people made up called 13th step.
Yeah, I read about it afterwards.
Exactly. There's actually, I think, a movie on Netflix about it too, where people pursue a newcomer, somebody that's new in recovery, and they're 13th stepping them, not really allowing them to get into the recovery process. There's no written rule. It's kind of unspoken, but then people speak about it too, that you should probably work on yourself in the first year of recovery and not be distracted by somebody else for whatever purposes, intimacy, sex, things like that. But it happens. It happens all the time. Sometimes it turns out like a total disaster. Every so often, you might have some kind of success in that type of relationship, but we won't even really get too far into that. Today, we were talking about 14th step. So really, I do want to talk a little bit about how we got to know each other. I've been in recovery for a long time. We had a mutual friend that helped us find each other. Something about you was very special. I knew it from the moment I was on the phone with you. There was just this, I get a lot of phone calls every single day from lots of different people with scenarios and things that are going on in their lives. I get to meet a lot of characters. I didn't know that I was going to meet you right away, and I don't think that was set up just yet. But once that you came into my path, I knew there was something special about you. You definitely. I know in the beginning you let me know that at one time you were a Fortune 500 guy. You were very successful. You did very well for yourself, and you talk about that in whatever capacity you like. But also down the line, I think we all have hardships in life, and there was some bumps in your road, and that's probably why our paths got crossed.
It's meant to be.
Yeah,
that's the way things work out, and the synchronicities, and we can talk about that in a whole nother segment. But that's a big part of life, is learning how to recognize those synchronicities. And it's funny because I don't think I told you the whole story, but David, the guy that hooked me up with you, yes. I was in transitional living coming out of a 90-day treatment in Long Beach. And I had 3 months, and I was working my butt off. I was doing the 90 and 90. I was working around the clock, Uber driving, which is a great way to get back on my feet. Mm-hmm. It's all I had left, literally, was my vehicle. And addiction does not discriminate, man. You hit it on the head with, I was that guy. I had a great career for 20 years in the finance industry. I did a lot of public speaking. I would go in and educate clients on the stock market. From the outside, it's that typical story, right? It's like, oh, well, the guy's got a yacht down at the harbor. The guy's got this great career and a wife and beautiful kids. And why would this guy go down the road of alcoholism? Mm-hmm. It wasn't by choice. I mean, there was choices along the way that led to it.
Sure.
But I think that you go through things for a reason. And the reason I'm here today is because I feel like it's my duty to share with other people what happens so that they don't have to potentially go through that darkness, or if they're already in that pit, how to leverage the tools that I found, fortunately, I look at as gifts to get out of that darkness of alcoholism. And I don't differentiate between alcoholism and addiction, and I know that can be kind of a gray area.
Neither do I.
What's your take on it?
I don't differentiate between the two of them. There's a lot of people that are members of, let's say, Alcoholics Anonymous, that when you start saying things about addiction or addicts, they do not like to correlate the two between. They really are convinced that alcoholism is a much different illness
Right.
as opposed to addiction. But really, like, alcohol is a substance. It inebriates you. It gets you. It definitely
It
gets
could
you.
possibly be one of the worst.
It is one. It is one of
Yeah.
the worst. It can be a killer, most definitely. It's a substance, and when you're doing it in an alcoholic fashion, meaning drinking daily, or around the clock, or secretively, or at work, or drinking and driving and putting people at risk, what's the difference between me doing fentanyl and doing alcohol?
Exactly.
I mean, they're both going to put me in a mind state where my mood is altered, my head is altered, my thought process is altered. None of it is. I'm not sober. I'm not in a sober state of mind.
Yeah.
So there is really, to me, no difference between alcoholism and addiction. But people will argue it up and down, and then to each their own. Everyone they're entitled to their own opinion.
There may be certain behavior traits to different types of substances, but it still doesn't negate the fact that you're doing it to fill some sort of a void. And I want to get to you in a moment. I want to kind of, because I know I've been around you the last couple of weeks quite a bit, and your phone is just blowing up. I mean,
Always.
It is nonstop.
Yeah.
And it's because you've dedicated your life to helping people, and I think that's great, but you don't have enough time in the day.
Right.
As far as an interventionist goes,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you got any good stories on success stories lately on
Sure. I
interventionists?
mean, so a lot of people that do see Peggy's Recovery Corner, just because it's a recovery podcast, they don't really know what I do for a living. What my profession is. I mean, I do wear a lot of different hats. I own some sober livings. I help a lot of people depending on what walk of life that they're from individually, where I'm not actually retained for my services. But I'm an interventionist through and through. So success stories, yes. I mean, there are many different people. More recently, there's a couple of people that had found me on a national level. You met one of them.
Yeah, I met a few of them, yeah.
So one of them I helped. That person was willing to get the help that they needed. We put them in a setting where they received the treatment that they needed. They detoxed. They stayed in treatment for a while. They went to sober living for a while, but they ended up, scheming and doing what a good addict would do to get back into that type of lifestyle. And that's where he went. But almost simultaneously, like within 1 week of that intervention, there was another gentleman who was from Middle America. I won't even say what state, because, just for his own anonymity. He's a great guy. He hated my guts for the first hour. We sat at a dinner table. There was his parents. There was his wife. His alcoholism, his addiction, his behaviors were clear as day that this guy was highly resistant to any further help. He had just gotten out of a detox. He'd done a few different detoxes in a short period of time. He'd been to treatment a lot in the past. He even fell asleep in a cemetery because he was so drunk, right? And so we're sitting at this table, and I could just tell that every skill that I have, that I tried to pull out of my arsenal, was not working with him, right? And
the blinders are on.
He was in total denial. I'd also been told a lot about his family in advance in a pre-intervention about how he's highly depressive, how he's always been this way, how he never felt like enough, and some of that stuff added up later. But here's the thing that happened that was magical. After I noticed that it was just becoming a pissing match, and everybody, like, the family wasn't following direction as far as what I had instructed them to do as far as the intervention, I just got to a point where I thought, you know what? Maybe if I separate this guy from the family, because it seems like there's a really sick family dynamic here, maybe if I just get him alone, I could talk to him alone. And so I asked him, I said, listen, I understand how you feel. I want to respect you in your own home. Like, I don't want to disrespect you. Would you be available just to go talk with me in the other room, just for a few minutes? He said, yeah, I'll talk to you. And we got up, we went in this, it was a little side house thing where we sat down, and it almost seemed like the second we sat down, he had this sense of calmness. Like, whatever was
just the two of you?
Just the two of us.
Yeah.
Whatever was going on within that house was what was getting under his skin the most. It almost felt like if he could have drank right then, he would have, just so that he didn't have to feel what he was feeling inside.
Right.
So we sit down, and all of a sudden he he told me, you know, I don't like those people in there. And I said, what do you mean, your own family? He said, well, I mean, they're my family. I love them, but there's a lot of things about them I don't like. Hypocrites, this, that, all that stuff, right? And so as we talked a little bit more, we identified like his own things that he resents and what it is within him that keeps making him go backwards instead of forwards.
Right.
Why he's been so resistant to actually embracing any kind of recovery. He told me about places that he'd gone and that there was no aftercare program or this, that.
Was it all? Did it seem to you victim mentality?
Not at all.
No?
Actually, like I didn't get that from him. Usually if I hear victim mentality, I will think to myself, this guy's playing victim.
Yeah.
But he was just frustrated. It was more frustrated that he's not enough. Right?
Did you feel it was outside circumstance controlling his behavior? Excuses to drink? I don't like these people.
I
don't
didn't
like the
feel
way
it.
they behave.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Because I've been.
That's what we're going to talk about.
Sure, because I've been it. So long story short is I ended up getting this guy to agree to coming to treatment, which he did. We got on a plane together, brought him across the country, and he ended up going into treatment. And he did everything. Well, first he walked into the center and he wanted to walk right out. After I dropped him off and everything. Something about maybe the aesthetics, whatever. Some kind of poor excuse.
Fear of the commitment.
Fear of a new environment,
Yeah.
but also I think the disease, the alcoholism, kicks in and wants to make an excuse of this place isn't up to my standards.
Sure.
But the staff called me. The staff calmed him down. He ended up staying the next. Oh, I did go on a phone call with him and another gentleman that actually knew the original interventionist that had referred me to him. So we kind of just talked to him and told him the truth. It's like, when are you going to actually do this thing? Like, you got a wife with a bunch of kids, like, and one of them is very young. Like, they're all young, but one is very young. They need their daddy. And
Yeah.
if you want to keep playing this song and dance, like, you're never going to get anywhere. At that point, I thought, I've done my part. I'm here to help you. So sure enough, he stayed. Then after that, I would visit him regularly. And when I'd visit him, this beautiful amount of trust started to build up within us. And now, after a month of being there, he did go back. He ended up going into a sober environment, wasn't coming back home just yet. And now we're working together. We do some coaching, things like that. Great guy, just an amazing human being. He listens. Whatever recommendations I make, if I mention to him to read stuff, if I tell him to read certain literature, I don't tell him, I don't get in the way of his work with his 12-step sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
but I also do ask where he is in the program so that I tell him my experience and what I believe, right? Not to say you shouldn't do that, but more like, yeah, I remember I did that and this and that. So we have a lot of great conversations. Just a good guy, really good guy. To me, that's a complete success story, because here was a guy that was drunk in a cemetery that wasn't doing anything with his life. He had put his job at risk. He had put his living situation at risk. And a lot of stuff made sense and still makes sense when I work with him one-on-one. I know where his fear is. Inadequacies, not feeling enough for certain family members, seeing certain family members doing things that it's okay for them to do, but it's not okay for him to do, right?
Yeah.
Which will definitely mess with you too. The part of America that he lived in, after visiting it, I thought to myself, oh my God,
I'd drink about it.
I would totally drink in this place.
Yeah.
Just sometimes I tend to wonder,
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because even though the job that I was talking about, going back to my experience, everybody's experience is different, is there was way too much freedom in that job. And that was because you could go on autopilot once you got really good at it.
Yeah.
You knew the material inside and out.
Yeah.
There was a solid 3 days out of the week where there's not a whole lot going on.
Right.
And you're still getting paid a decent salary. So downtime is bad news for people that have
Sure.
addictive personality in general. And I never
because they
thought that I would
ruminate
be,
in their
well,
head.
you ruminate. Yeah, you have way too much time. And it reminds me of, have you seen that interview with Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park, right before he took his own life, like a few weeks before? He's doing the interview and he's like, this place up here between the skull is a bad neighborhood and I should not be alone.
It's interesting you say that, because the treatment center that I went into to get sober, we had my wizard, my Yoda, the guy that was the guy that I was just enthralled and learned from. He used to sit in groups all the time and say, stay out of your head. It's a dangerous neighborhood.
It's a dangerous neighborhood.
He was a Persian guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
just a great guy. So now what I'm really interested in knowing, I mean, I love when you ask me questions, and just so everybody knows, we're going to be doing a lot of segments, a lot of these videos together because Jason's important to me. He helps, he helps a lot of people, but really he's when I say a deep spirit, like he's on some deeper level, higher level consciousness that I recognize that, right? And I really, really enjoy my conversations with you. They're meaningful. This 14th step.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, I appreciate the kind words. I'm on no different level than anybody else. I think that just through experience, and let's remember, I mean, I'll be 50 years old pretty soon. I've been through quite a bit, from playing professional baseball, lots of great experiences in my life. And I think that was the hard part to handle is when you get hit with something like alcoholism and depression that takes you and cuts you out from under the knees. It's hard not to sit there and beat the crap out of yourself. I was my own worst enemy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and you and I were on the same vibe when we first. I remember when we first met at your house. You were like, "Hey man, I like your vibe. I like yours too." Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what we're talking about because the way our reality is structured, and a lot of people are starting to figure this out because we're going through much more of a conscious shift. The whole world. I mean, it's crazy. When you got artificial intelligence out there, we're really shifting into possibly a whole new economy if we survive it. A whole new thought process. And really what I found going through the 12 steps, which I do not want to take anything away from the 12 steps. I think it is a divine intervention type process that was that Bill W. had the white light experience and then partnered with the Oxford group and came up with these 12 principles. It's about as close as you can get to a magic pill from what I've seen. I think you can probably vouch for that if you actually work it.
Yes.
What I found, for me at least, and I can only share my experience, was I had to learn to redefine myself because once I got to a position where I was so down and just like literally, I mean, this is sad when I look back, but I had a ritual the last 6 months when I was really in it, where before bed I'd be like, "Good night, you piece of shit. I hope you don't wake up."
Like, you used to say that to yourself.
That's what I would say every single night, and I would be pissed off when I woke up.
Is this when you were...
When I was drinking and just could not stop. Isolated. And it's the same old story.
You hated
hear it
yourself.
over and over. Hated myself. And and what I want to talk about with the 14th step is once you've gone through, and we're going to talk about definitions. I hear this a lot. I have to work the steps. I didn't look at it as work. Yeah. I looked at it as this is an adventure to grow and be a different person.
Sure.
Because I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done.
Right.
My kids, I love them more than anything in the world. And that was the most disappointing thing is to see, have them see their dad go through this and just going through that cycle of just beating the crap out of yourself. Like, dude, how could I do this?
Right.
That's the baffling part of the addiction. It's like, I can't stop. I keep relapsing.
Right.
What is going on? So when I say shift the definitions, is I didn't look at, I made a decision. I'm not going to look at this as work. Because what do you think when you hear work? It's effort.
Yeah.
It's something you don't want to do, right?
Right.
No, you change definitions of things, and that's the basis for how you experience things. So before we really get into the 14th step itself, which is really simple, it's basically just knowing, that fact of knowing that you are now a different person. Mm-hmm. Going through the steps is absolutely imperative, I think, and I'm sure you would agree. I think we've talked about this, but everybody should go through the 12 steps. So this world would be such a better place if just a fraction of the population would go through the 12 steps.
Here's what's amazing. I've been a counselor. I've ran groups. I used to always say this. If the entire world was working the 12 steps, we'd have a much more peaceful world.
We'd be harmonious, man.
Right. The problem is not a lot of people want to do self-examination and really take a look at themselves.
Exactly.
A lot of people are very comfortable with embracing their defects of character, if you will. Yeah. And what are these defects of character that we speak of? These are learned behaviors that we inherit growing up based off of the teachings and the things that we see people do. Mm-hmm. So we get this ideology like, that's an absolute and that's the way I need to see that.
Right.
And so I got to act like this because of that.
You just segued perfectly into what I'm going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go through real quick, and I'll try to reiterate these because they're very simple. This comes down to what is the reality we live in? How do you leverage this world that we're in to be a better person, to help other people, to not get stuck in negativity. And it's really knowing, first of all, you can, if you want to simplify it and dummy it down,
Yes.
the best quote that I've ever heard is the late Wayne Dyer. I don't know if you followed Wayne Dyer
Love
before.
Wayne Dyer.
You know this, then. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yeah.
That is, nothing could be more true. When I started living under that principle and I started seeing things change, it compelled me to the point of almost obsession where I was like, what is to this? Because this works. And so I started examining reality in itself. If you want to dummy it down, you don't need to look at quantum physics. That stuff's interesting.
Yeah.
Let the physicists drive themselves nuts going looking at that stuff.
Yeah.
It's dummied down. You can look at Newton's third law, which is for every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction.
Sure.
Our reality that we live in this 3D world is an illusion. It's a mirror. Whether you believe that or not, I'm not here to push a belief system on you.
Right.
Use it as a placebo, an archetype for your life, and see how it works. If you do this for even 1 day, 1 week, longer, you're going to be like, holy shit, this is the way things work.
Yeah.
Right? So you know a placebo, right? Like,
Yes.
Tej says, I got a headache. I go, hey, here's a sugar pill, but it's aspirin. You take it. Chances are your headache's going away.
All
right?
of a sudden it's gone.
All of a sudden it's gone. So use this as a placebo if you don't buy into this, and just start living by it and see what happens. If the mirror is a reflection, what you put out is exactly what you get back. Okay? You had mentioned these people have these different definitions, is basically what you're explaining of this is that, and this is that, and so I have to behave this way based on my definition of that.
Right.
The whole key is once you understand that if you're getting up in the morning and you're looking in the mirror and you're all soured out and grumpy and frowning, the only way that that mirror can possibly change your reality is for you to smile back at the mirror if you want to be positive, right? So now you got to smile back. That's the reality reflecting back. As simple as that. You don't have to go any further and make it overcomplicated. I used to tell people when I was teaching trading the markets, I'd have a lot of engineers, super smart people, right? And I would tell them, I'd be like, this is a group of engineers like at Boeing. I'd be like, listen, I'm like, you're some of the smartest people on earth. You're the worst stock traders in the world because you overanalyze everything. You're going to get paralysis by analysis. I'm going to give you a simple formula on how to trade stocks or whatever you want to trade in the market. And they'd screw it all up. It'd be like, no, that's too simple, right? Don't overcomplicate this
Right.
stuff. Once you understand that the reality is simply a mirror reflecting back what you put out, whether it's positive or negative, reality doesn't care. Reality is unbiased, okay? You want negative, you'll get negative. Once you understand that, step number 2 is redefine your definitions of things. And this is key. And I'll relate it to, since our catalyst as far as growth was addiction, I'll relate it to alcoholism. And this might be kind of a gray area for some of the people in hardcore in the AA community, but you and I discussed this briefly.
Yes.
And I would like to get your thoughts too. I made a decision. I was doing the meetings after I got out of treatment in Long Beach, and there's a lot of great meetings of like real old school, like hardcore, like 30 years,
Yes.
35 years, right? So I'm going to these meetings. There's like 8 to 10 people, and what I noticed, and this is no judgment against them at all. It was just, I was like, these people are talking about their struggles, which everybody has struggles. It doesn't matter what level of life you're at.
Sure.
But they seemed like they were struggling with no abundance, financially, relationship-wise. It was the same story, and I was like, is there a common theme here? The common theme that I saw was they would identify themselves. I'll give you an example. This one guy, his name was Jim. He'd start off every meeting, hi, my name's Jim. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm still an asshole. And it's like, well, dude, congratulations. Like, you're a dry drunk. Like, did you
Right.
do anything to better yourself besides not drink? And so the point I'm making is I made a decision.
Mel thinks I'm that guy.
So you can
And
still
I-
be that guy as long as you
and I
understand,
think
as long
Mel
as you're
is that
aware.
guy.
As long as you're aware of it.
Just kidding.
And so I made a conscious decision. I was like, well, wait a minute now. This is what comes down to. These people have defined themselves as an alcoholic or addict, and that's just what they were going to be the rest of their lives, apparently. And so I am not saying that I don't have a problem when I drink. I am an alcoholic when I drink.
Sure.
I am allergic to alcohol to the fullest extent. If I have one beer, I'm done.
Right.
It's game over. It's hospital visit. I do not deny that.
Right.
What I did tell myself is I refuse to go through life being Jason the alcoholic. And That's because I decided I wasn't going to define myself. Because what do you think of when you hear alcoholic?
That the guy's still drinking.
Or he's just, what about character defects? So, this guy's no willpower, no discipline.
Yeah, because there's a stigma attached to the
maybe
name.
abusive.
Yeah.
Right? All the things that go to the stigma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's important. If you are going to define yourself as an alcoholic and the general population looks at alcoholism as negative, I didn't want to be part of that. And it makes a big difference because what you define is then how you are going to behave based on the emotions of the definition. The emotions that are stirred up by a definition create behaviors,
right,
which in turn create you or your reality,
mm-hmm.
right? So I thought it was extremely important, at least for me. I'll leave that up to everybody else. Like I say,
it's a good thing that you bring up because I know even in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in the beginning, it says when we are speaking publicly, or it says this one part where it says we omit our names and we identify as members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, speaking publicly, if I was to be speaking publicly on, let's say, a podcast or on the radio or on television, if I'm speaking publicly and omitting my name, but saying I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I kind of feel like that goes against the traditions of AA. Because we're not, we're not supposed to. But if we're speaking in a room of, let's say, Alcoholics Anonymous, and identifying as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I have friends that do this, and I've done it myself.
I'm a member.
I have been in a 12-step meeting, and I said I'm a grateful member of Cocaine Anonymous.
Yeah.
And I'm amongst my people. Each person, that one might say, Stephen addict, Carrie addict, Michael addict.
Yeah.
This one alcoholic. But I'm, luckily in CA, they're all inclusive, so you can be an alcoholic in that room and share, and it doesn't matter if you did cocaine, right? As opposed to like in AA, there's a singleness of purpose, but at the end of the day, it's the label that follows the name.
It's the label. And that was my issue, at least for myself, and I stand by it. So it's up to each individual. But
now there are some people that say I'm a recovered alcoholic.
I see nothing wrong with that. That's more, that would be, I could identify as that.
Yeah. Because if you really get into the literature and do the steps and implement it into your life, and you've recovered from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, means you've learned the alcoholic condition and how you've had it, right? And how you don't want to have it. Now, I have a friend, they say it's a daily reprieve based on contingent on a spiritual condition, right? I have a friend that says, I don't follow that. Like, I'm not going to drink anymore. I might have I don't need to have a daily reprieve.
He's made the solid decision.
He said he's not going back to a drink. He just doesn't want to drink.
How long has he been sober?
He's like 12 years sober.
Yeah.
13 years sober.
This is actually going to tie into what really, maybe he's gotten to the 14th step. And that is...
Actually, he's got a podcast, and I think you would enjoy being on his podcast.
I would love to.
Yeah.
Maybe he just has gotten to that point where it's the knowing. And you can't really describe a knowing feeling, right?
Right.
But the knowing that he's not going to drink again, he may have just gotten to that point where there probably is a good chance he's not going to drink again.
I mean, that could be a number of things. It could be that if he's awakened, if he's truly awakened to his reality and he knows what's not going to work in his life, and he's made the decision not to, more power to him.
I think that's what it is. It's the knowledge of knowing how this works.
Did the awakening come from the 12 steps? Personally,
possibly.
And I don't say this to be cocky, but I know my experience and I know what happened. I had a psychic change before I ever worked step 1. I made a decision in the beginning, I am done.
Yeah.
I'm done. And that was after 18 years of extensive alcohol use, drug use, criminal activity. I am done. I want to change my life completely, 100%. And that was more through some therapeutic stuff that I did, where I just thought, no, because I did have an idea when I first got sober, a little bit of weed won't hurt.
Yeah.
But I was set straight, and not just because somebody put me in my place, because we did some therapy for me to go deeper and see what it is within me that thinks that I cannot survive in the world unless I've got something that's going to alter my headspace.
Right. So the fact that you said, I'm done, is a definition in itself, and that's why it's so powerful. You made a choice at that moment.
I'm done.
That done means no mas, none.
And here's the thing. Another thing is a lot of people will call me that are struggling with meth addiction.
Yeah.
I have extensive history with meth addiction. I was a meth user for 16 of my 18 years of using, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't have the means to go to treatment. They don't have the ability. They have kids. They have to be there for their kids. They cannot take off from work for an extensive period of time to go somewhere. So I tell them, okay, then you know what? This is what I feel you could do for yourself. If you can't go to treatment because you don't have insurance or money or the means to go, and you want to do this on your own, even though you've probably tried to do this 1,000 times within your own home, usually I say people should get out of their element, out of their comfort zone. This is a decision you can make with yourself. You called me for help. You're looking for some guidance.
Just free up and look in the mirror.
Exactly. You're looking for some guidance. You want me to guide you? Let me tell you what was told to me. Go look in the mirror. Go in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Have a conversation. Look at yourself dead in your eyes, right in your pupils. It's very hard for any human being to really have a conversation with themselves in the mirror. You can laugh at yourself. You can say, you want to quit? And tell yourself, no, I don't want to quit at all. I'm actually not ready. You can laugh it off. Or you can look at yourself and say, are you ready to do this 100%? 100%. And if you decide within yourself, yes, I'm going to stop, go and sleep it off, because you're going to need to catch up on a lot of sleep that you've missed out on, right? And during the time that you wake up, perhaps to use the restroom or to eat something, usually 3 days, 4 days, right? If you have this idea of, I can't do this, I need the energy, I need to go do more meth, remind yourself you made a decision with you. You talked to that guy Pej on the phone, he guided you, take some guidance, and then go and make the decision within yourself and say, hell no, I'm not going to get high this time.
Right.
That's where you rise above. That's where you have the ability. And then afterwards, if you can make it through that short meth detox, right, then hit me up and I will guide you so that you can do it from the comfort of your own home to some Zoom meetings where people are carrying a message where it'll help you with your recovery to get your recovery started. That one decision within a person's life for themselves could keep them sober for the rest of their life, depending on the individual and how serious they are. That's why most people that call me, I ask them, okay, a lot of people are calling just to ask questions and get information, right? I often send that one to text, right? And I ask them, how serious are you about quitting? Because you're never going to get started if you don't quit. Another thing is you talked about 3D living, three-dimensional living. Mm-hmm. The majority of humanity lives in a three-dimensional world. Mm-hmm. It's the world of matter. It's the world of material. Yeah. It's what's going to fill you up. Money, sex, cars, drugs, food, alcohol, gambling. That's all 3D living. Yeah. It's an illusion.
It's an illusion, absolutely.
It's all an illusion. But when you get into that fourth dimension, which I believe a lot along the lines of what you're saying, the 14th, when you're in that 14th step of life, at least your outlook, your views, the way you see things are much different.
It's totally different.
It's way different.
And it's beautiful because you get to the point where you see everything.
Depression is a thing of the past.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't exist.
And if you hear that when you're in depression, you're like, you want to just punch him in the face.
Yeah, I know. And I have a lot of deep opinions about depression.
Yeah.
I have seen clinically depressed people that absolutely need to be medicated.
We need to do an episode on depression and pharmaceuticals.
Most definitely. They absolutely need to be medicated to at least stabilize.
Yes.
But I do not feel like they should be
ongoing.
It should be for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
I believe a lot of it is trauma-based. That's why when I was talking to you about Gabor Mate, everything stems from trauma in an addict or alcoholic. So another thing I want to tell you, and I'm kind of going on.
No, it's okay.
On a lot of AAs,
mm-hmm.
a lot of old school AAs do not want to associate trauma with alcoholism. If you bring it up in any type of AA setting, you might get shut down or talked to after by some old timers or some people that don't want to associate alcoholism with trauma. Now, I believe those people are probably the ones that carry the most trauma.
Exactly.
And that's why they don't talk about it. They don't want to look at it. Another thing is people want to not associate alcoholism with trauma. Little do they know, if you really do some research, Bill Wilson was a very traumatized person. Mm-hmm. Dr. Bob the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous were very traumatized people. They carried a lot of trauma, a lot. It was very easy to overcome and numb out their trauma by drinking.
Yeah.
Right? Bill himself was, after he wrote the big book, created the 12 steps, 17 years after, when he was in the process of writing the 12 and 12 with another author, he was going through a deep depression. So what were the steps doing for his depression? Was he in the 14th step, as you would label it? And also, he wasn't by no means. A lot of people praise Bill Wilson or talk about Bill Wilson's experience as if he's the end all be all. He committed adultery in his recovery.
Yeah.
He wasn't faithful, right? So
we're all human beings, and there's going to be challenges, and you're not going to come close to being a perfect individual.
Sure.
Going back to, I'm in the process of writing a book, and I was flowing last night. You get into one of those zones where you're just like nonstop.
Right.
And one of the main things I was trying to come up with to explain for myself, but then hopefully addiction is addiction. Hopefully it'll help other people. Is they talk about that void you're trying to fill, right?
Sure.
And so I'll try to remember it, but it was something to the effect of, I said, what addiction is the attempt to fill an emptiness with something that does not fill the emptiness, right? The feeling of emptiness, you just can't fill it. You can keep doing it over and over. So what's the core of that? Well, if you look up the definition of void, and you look up like a philosophical definition, it would mean manifest nothing, or manifested of nothing, a void, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're trying to fill a void, what is the void? Well, the void is, if manifesting nothing means no change, good or bad, that means that you're hopeless. You don't think there's any other choice, right? So if the void equals hopelessness, how do you get to the point where you realize you can change? And this stems, and this will go into the higher power deal, but the way that it has helped me personally, and you talk about the higher powers, I think we're all sparks of the Creator. We're all sparks of God. A spark from the fire is still fire. So if we are all sparks of God and we are co-creators here, once you understand that, and especially once you get to know that, digging deep enough, then you know, well, wait a minute, if I'm a co-creator, I can change. I can manifest. I have a choice. And now you know that there's at least a choice to get out of this darkness. And that's the journey and the process that I wish I would have known long ago, that, hey, once you're in that darkness, what the darkness does, it's got this whole bag of tricks it'll use on you, which is, if you go into a lighted room like we're in right now, it's very easy if we had multiple doors to go, you know what, I think I'm going to go through that one. Let's say they're labeled, and you can go, well, that one leads down that path, that leads out, but that one's dark. I don't want to go down that. I know where that goes. When you're in light, but when you're in darkness, it hides the doors. You just don't think that there's a door to get out.
Right.
And so what do? You continue. It uses a reward system on you. And the reward system is, hey, I've got a little something for you. You'll temporarily feel like there's hope. Go ahead and have some more of this. Drink more of this. Take another hit of this. That'll temporarily make you feel like that's the only choice that you have. Mm-hmm. And you'll keep doing that because you feel just a little bit better until it wears off. And then you'll continue in the cycle, and we'll just keep you in darkness. That's the nature of negativity and darkness. That's its job, is to keep you in darkness, and it is a perceived, there's no choice to get out.
Hence the reason that you were telling yourself you're a piece of shit and you were an active alcoholic.
And you know what? I was never, if you can ask any of my friends and family members, I was never a bad guy. Like, I was kind to people. I would never talk to anybody the way that I would talk to myself.
And the negative self-talk is one of the evilest things that we could do to ourselves. It is the demon within.
Absolutely.
So, and since you say that, a lot of times I have people that call me about their loved one, and as they're describing and painting the picture of what that person is right then, they always throw in, he was such a good boy when he was growing up. She was such a good girl when she was growing up. And I always tell them, I said, they are good people.
They're good people.
They're great
people.
My
theory is on that? And at least for me, it was, and you hear this all the time in recovery, I was a people pleaser. I didn't like confrontation. Never did, ever since I was a kid. I grew up in a great family environment. I had no reason to be an alcoholic. My parents were loving. They're still together. I still talk to my parents. I love my parents to death. They love me. I never had any sort of abuse or anything like that. So I'm trying to figure out, as I'm going through this, it was almost that guilt of, what happened? Why? I have no excuse to be doing this, right? I hear the stories in treatment, and I'm like, Jesus, this is horrific.
Right.
Like, this person's whole family was murdered, and here I am, a freaking executive at a company, and I'm going downhill. Like, what's my problem, right? So you start getting into that cycle where it's tough to get out. You're basically just beating yourself down with that negative talk. But going back to the point of the people pleasing is, when you're a people pleaser, you start not setting boundaries because you don't want the confrontation. When you don't set boundaries, you build resentment real quick. And when you build resentment, and then it feels like it's too late because you haven't set boundaries, you start self-sabotaging. And it's just over and over again. That's why I think you hear over and over that they were a good person. They're usually people that would give you the shirt off their back.
Right.
That's the sad thing.
Yeah.
And they're usually the ones that go down the hardest.
There's been people that, exactly, I hear about, they were givers, they were helpers, they were assisting people that were less fortunate, it seemed, at one time. Why would they go in that direction? Again, I mean, I cannot emphasize it enough. Everybody has a story. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, majority of people, carry trauma.
Yeah.
Whether in the recovery process or people that never will see recovery, right? Some kind of trauma. PTSD can come in many different shapes and forms. It could be from being raped, molested. It could be from inadequacies, insecurities, many different types of things. Being bullied, being put down, being fired, having somebody that's unhealthy and toxic.
So while you're on that, so this is where the definitions come in. You mentioned, for example, being fired. Mm-hmm. So the power of definition would be, let's say you are fired from your job and it looks like the world's going to be over.
Yes.
How do you shift that into an opportunity? That's the hard part. But if you can, you go, you know what? Maybe being fired is the best thing that ever happened to me. I didn't really care for the job. It gives me an opportunity to go out and look for something I'm really passionate about and accept it for what it is and look at it from a positive aspect. When you put out the positive thoughts of, hey, this is what it is, I accept it, I'm going to make the best of it, right. The universe tends to lay out in front of you the synchronicities to make the best out of the situation.
Yeah, that old saying, when one door closes, another door opens.
That's just one simple example.
In my recovery, when I first got sober, life is always really good when in recovery if you feel like you're in God's will, right? Until life shows up.
Yeah.
And once life throws you a curveball, which some people think that it's not God and not testing you, but I believe like everything comes from the higher source.
Okay, so there's a good time to recap because you just hit exactly what I was going to talk about in the third step of it. So step number one is realizing that the reality is a mirror, right? Okay. Reflection. What you put out, you get back. Step number two is redefine your definitions. Okay? Mm-hmm. If your definition of something has a negative connotation, redefine it.
Right.
As long as you're not hurting anybody else. I'm not talking about going out and doing this woke crap where you're like, hey, I'm uncomfortable on my skin, so I'm going to redefine my world so that you have to inconvenience you to make me feel better. That's a bunch of crap. That's not, no, you do what you have to do for yourself to be a better person.
Don't try to push it on me.
Don't push it on other people, right? Redefine. So you realize that it's a mere reflection. Make sure your definitions, you're very clear with that. Be very careful with the thoughts in your head. And then step number three is exactly to your point, which is the universe is going to now test you. If you've already made up that mind, you made up your mind, the universe is like, oh, they're on the right track.
But
I'm going to throw them a little wrench and see if they actually behave in the manner that they've committed to. So
that sounds like step three from the regular 12 steps.
Yeah, if you get
turn your will and your life over, how much are you really turning your will and your life?
Really going to? Are you walking the talk, right?
Yeah.
And so you get a wrench thrown in there, and if you right away just go back to your negativity, oh shit, I'm going to go drink or whatever else. Well, guess what the universe says? It's just like that documentary, The Secret. It's a great line. Your wish is my command. Right. So it just throws you the negative.
A lot of people criticize The Secret, but I'll tell you right now.
There's a lot of good stuff too.
This is what changed my life in the beginning of my recovery. I was in the 12-step process because they were sending us to meetings. And I had really good mentors that really knew the steps. They had a working knowledge of the book. But there were certain days in rehab where we had these educational videos. I never liked videos or in science class, right?
Yeah.
Or in history class. Now I'm in rehab and I need to learn about the front cortex of my brain and all that. So I was like, that's boring. But one day they put on The Secret and I was like, what is this?
That's the best.
I was like, what is this? Who are these guys? Mm-hmm. Through The Secret alone, I learned that you create your own energy. Obviously, there's a lot of quantum physics and things.
Vibration.
Yeah, you create your own energy. If you want to have a positive, good life,
Yeah.
you have a positive outlook. You wake up happy to be alive.
Yeah.
If you want to have a negative life, everything sucks.
Exactly.
I suck, you suck, the world sucks, everything sucks, right?
The universe says your wish is my command.
But I also think that for me, I see evidence of God in so many things because early on I didn't know who Michael Beckwith was. He was one of the he was basically one of the spiritual teachers in The Secret, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I saw him on there, I thought I like that guy's vibe.
He's got to have the dreads.
He's got the dreads.
Yeah.
Then later
now he's
on,
got a shaved head.
later on, I recognized him and got a book of his and read the book. I think it was called Life Visioning. It was so good, right? And it just expanded my mind so much. Then I was dating somebody that said, "Have you ever gone to Agape in LA?" I'm like, "What is that?" She said, "It's Michael Beckwith's place." Michael Beckwith, I know who that is. We went to his place, met him, watched him speak to a crowd of people that were non-denominational, lots of spirit within the room. It wasn't even a church. It kind of had the feel, but it wasn't that. And then I went to a Prince concert, which I am the biggest Prince fan ever. And I met this girl that was a Prince fan that we just happened to be standing next to each other. So we're basically at this concert, and all of a sudden I look on the big screen and Prince brings up this guy up on stage, and she goes, "That's my pastor." And I said, "That's Michael Beckwith." She goes, I go, "You go to Agape?" She goes, "Yes, I go to Agape." Just look at the way the spirit of the universe worked in all of that.
Yeah.
I was a newcomer.
Yeah.
The 12 steps had its place for me. I liked Don Miguel Ruiz. I loved reading the Four Agreements and any book written by him,
awesome.
right? Yeah. But then other spiritual teachers, I studied Marianne Williamson extensively, Wayne Dyer, as you were saying earlier, but Michael Beckwith was a powerful force. And to this day, I still will go to Agape every so often because I want to go hear his message, because his message spoke to me early on in my recovery.
Yeah. And then synchronistically just kind of follows up.
It just kind of...
And we'll do a whole nother, because we don't have time, we'll do a whole nother episode on the mechanics of how the higher self and the physical mind work together to do exactly what you're talking about, which is getting out of your own way so the higher mind can create the synchronicities in your life that you can choose which green lights and red lights to follow, and then flow downstream with life instead of struggling and going upstream. And
Absolutely.
It's great. And people talk about, I know manifesting is a big thing. And I'm not saying I have the secret to it, but it's simple. It's literally
simple.
Like
if
what
you
you
put
do
your
is
mind,
you quit worrying.
You put your mind to it and you give it your all, it'll happen.
Exactly. It has to happen by universal law,
right?
But you can't get in the way of it.
Right.
Getting out of the way of yourself, which is your higher self.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you want to continue to talk about the remaining steps, or should we do that in our next segment?
So real quick, it's very simple. Let's say that just try this. For those of you in the audience, if you've never tried this before, if you have, you probably at some point had a little stumbling block and you resorted back to negativity. So if you go through throwing out positive vibes and trying to turn every single quote unquote challenge or perceived challenge into a potential opportunity, then you will see that your life will change drastically. Try it one day at a time. You get up to a week, you're like, oh my God, this is working. All of a sudden you're at a month down the line. The 14th step that we're talking about here is very simple, which is if you look at our reality as changing every moment billions of times a second, okay, like a frame, like the old school movie pictures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each frame is a reality. It moves because we move, and it creates the illusion of time going by. So, the theory is we don't need to get too in depth that time and space are all an illusion. So the objective here is on the 14th step, you are making a conscious decision that you are literally a different person. You are going to be XYZ. You're going to define yourself as XYZ in whatever direction you want to be going in your life. And step by step, that frame will slowly change to the point where you're saying it's universal law that eventually the outcome has to happen.
Mm.
And if you focus on it, the more you focus on it, the quicker it will happen by throwing you the perceived coincidences to get you on the right path. But the end of that step is when you finally get to know it in your mind, you know what? I never was. This isn't denial. This is actually shifting into a frequency of perceiving a reality that you never even had a problem. You are no longer an addict. And that's going to sound a little counterintuitive, and it's going to sound like maybe it's going against some of the stuff. It's not denial.
Mm-hmm.
It's the premise of the reality we live in and shifting into that frequency that I don't even have to live. In fact, and we'll wrap up with this, is you can look online. People with associative personality disorder, what we used to call multiple personality disorder.
Yes.
Have you seen some of this crazy stuff where how powerful the mind is? They change into literally a different person. They change, now they write with the other hand. Now they're allergic if they drink orange juice, being this personality and not the other. That's how powerful your mind is. It actually can shift into a frequency of a different perceived reality.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I
Eye
believe it.
color's changing.
Wow.
Crazy.
Wow.
So that's the tip of the iceberg, but no, thanks for having me on, man. It's,
No, for sure.
overdue.
So as mentioned, I'm going to have Jason on lots more episodes because there's a lot to talk about. We have a lot of conversations where I always think to myself, well, that needs to be listened to. Well, that needs to be out there. And I know because I have this channel, I do have a lot of different guests that come on with all the personal stories. I think today we covered some things about Jason, but I think I'm absolutely certain I want to do a lot more podcast episodes of talking about, this type of stuff, like taking it to like a deeper level and really tapping into consciousness and the importance of
how important it is for everybody. It's not just recovery.
And I'll say this before we close out. This is what I always felt. I feel that every human being has a soul, a deep soul. And I feel the soul was here before the body. That's what I feel, okay? I do believe that every human being is a mystic at their core, meaning that every human being has many opportunities to be able to gain information and messages through messengers and be able to get to that core and really, really find who they are as a mystic. For me, the soul is love, and love can be radiated, reciprocated all throughout the world. One of the reasons, a lot of people say, Pesh, why do you take it to this level? Why do you want to be out there so much? Why do you want to help so many people? Really, when I got my life back because of everything I had lost before, and I'm not talking about the tangible stuff. I mean, I lost my soul. I really did.
Yeah.
But when I got my life back, I made a commitment within myself to be able to go out and carry and spread a message to anybody and everybody from all walks of life, not just addicts and alcoholics, manic depressive people, people with high anxiety, people with schizophrenia. I have some of the most fascinating conversations with people that are in full-blown schizoaffective schizophrenia. They will talk in their psychosis about things that are just
some of the smartest people in the world.
Fascinating things, right? It's one of my specialties to just be able to be there for them and let them know they've been heard. I know we talked about that too, but there's a lot more to cover today.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is
the
just
tip of the iceberg,
one first segment.
That was awesome.
It's called 14th Step. We will get more into it more so that people can really, hopefully, learn from it, and maybe some of them will want to seek it within themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Appreciate it, Pesh.
Signing out. Much love to everybody.